Just for folks joining us, we're here on the state capitol, and there is a Act 181 protest. A bipartisan protest.
iPad, so we have it up on the screen. And my mom goes, "Larry, get it yourself. What's your song?" So you tell me.
Is a tad bit windy, so I do apologize for any wind interference.
Remember, the feet flush down the toilet. 350 people.
Just got word there's about 350 people.
I actually have not figured out everybody's state stuff. Yeah.
Everybody's here, Glenn, except for you. You need to come down.
Lots and lots of time.
You're here with us in spirit.
I really love her.
All right. It's like we're about to get this show on the road.
Welcome. We have a great looking crowd today. In my pocket, I've got 1,000 other people, 1,000 names of people who couldn't make it today. I'm Senator Russ Ingalls. And I want to welcome you, Vermonters, to the Repeal Act 181 rally. I say Vermonters because today we aren't Republicans, we aren't Democrats, we aren't independents, we're not progressives. We are Vermonters united as one that transcends any political party. We have rural areas in 14 counties. Act 181 does not discriminate. It harms us all. Today, we are going to hear from some great speakers that have opinions on some or all of Act 181. They will share their stories. They will tell of their hopes, their dreams, why they chose to stay in Vermont or to migrate here. Not one of them will tell you that they came because of Act 181, but many of them will tell you why it would be nearly impossible to stay because of this terrible law. We have been trying to get our message out about the harms of Act 181 for better than 2 years. We have spoken about how America's most popular governor vetoed this bill, only to be overridden by the supermajority at the time. But here's the scary part. Only about 20% of the population knows how harmful this law is. So I will ask all of you, let not today be the end of your work. You must leave here today with renewed vigor. You must leave here to let your neighbors be aware. You must leave here today ready to continue a fight. Let today be the day you started. Some feel different about Act 181. I'll make you a promise as Senator Russ Ingalls. I have been from day one trying to repeal Act 181, and I will do everything in my power to make that happen. Thank you very much. Is the Lieutenant Governor here? We're now going to have Ian and Caitlin Ackerman from Cabot.
Hey, everybody. This is my wife, Caitlin. I'm Ian, obviously. We're both from Cabot, and we do maple syrup. So I grew up on a small dairy farm in Cabot, and that's where my work ethic and passion caring for land came from. After I graduated Cabot High School, I worked for a couple businesses in Barrie and decided that the woods is where I wanted to be. I took out my first loan and built a sugar house in my home on a piece of land in Cabot with a very long driveway. It's quiet, peaceful. And what I did would have triggered Act 250 and all kinds of red tape. How can people like me buy a piece of land with their life savings as a before you even get started? The bank wouldn't have signed my paperwork. Ackerman Maple Farm never would have even gotten off the ground, and I, along with my wife Caitlin, would have likely had to leave Vermont to find work elsewhere. Caitlin and I were able to start our family in Ackerman Maple Farm because nobody stood in our way. As our business grew, we added more land. Today, our farm is one of the nicest pieces of sugar woods you'll find in Cabot. Sorry, Bert. We aren't fragmenting forests. We're putting it together and managing it well. My dream for 30 years has been to turn the snowmobile trail into my driveway for a retirement home. I used that same snowmobile trail from 2002 to 2005 to get to the high school in the winter. The dream is to build a very small single-story house and a small sugar house, good for 1,500 taps out in the middle of that property. Just Caitlin and I, the animals, a state-permitted sewer plan, and the freshest water you can drink from a spring. When I semi-retire, I want to be able to visit with our 3 children and watch their children run around. It's all smiling, saying, "We did it, babe. We made it happen." Hopefully, my kids will live in the house I'm in now, continuing the Ackerman Maple Farm legacy of healthy land, healthy trees, and a thriving maple syrup farm. Under Act 181, I'm sure it's technically possible to get all the permits and approval, but why the red tape and extra costs and unknowns? I'll have kept the land pristine for 30 years. We'll have the necessary state permits for water and sewer, and all will be good. There's no need for more laws regulating us folk that care for the very soil we survive off of. Caitlin and I are just one young Vermont family. Many young Vermont folks work their butts off to stay here with big dreams of their own. A lot of these folks are farmers and sugar makers and other folks who work the land. But the sad reality right now is more folks are moving out than staying. We need to find ways to help build growth and keep younger folks in this state. Act 181 makes it even harder. You can't just look at a computer screen and decide where a wildlife corridor might be. The folks like myself who are in the woods day in and day out can tell you the wildlife corridor is everywhere. All the hardworking folks that I know respect the land. Don't forget that much that we love about Vermont was created by Vermont's small farmers, loggers, sawyers, and sugar makers. We've been around for a long time. We know how to manage our land. The more and more we impose mandates on our families, the harder it is for them to survive. So I hope that the legislature can come together, stop and think about the impact this will have on regular people, small businesses, farmers, and especially the next generation of Vermonters. I'm 5th generation on my mom's side and would love to see my kids be the 6th. But Act 181 may just be the turning point for us and many others. It seems pointless to buy land and have a dream when maps are being made by people you've never met, by people that have never stepped foot on your property, and yet they're trying to control the very land you own. That's how most of us feel about Act 181.
Let's hear it for the Ackermans of Cabot. We now have Sam Lincoln.
Good afternoon, rural Vermont. Good to see you here. Sam Lincoln from Randolph Center. I've spent more than 20 years advocating for agriculture and Vermont's forest economy. I also served here as Deputy Commissioner of Forest Parks and Recreation under Governor Scott, where I worked on efforts to reform Act 250 to both protect forests and make the law work for rural Vermont. Vermont's forest economy businesses must compete. They must innovate. They have to grow just to stay viable. But too often our regulatory system makes that harder instead of easier. It should not take 3 years to get a permit to make bark mulch on land the town has already zoned as industrial use. You should not be denied a permit to process firewood because you're doing it in a forest conservation zone. It should not cost a small business owner $100,000 in fees, expert witnesses, and other conditions just to get permitted to produce the fuel chips that heat this very building. And unfortunately, those wood chips are now hauled in from out-of-state suppliers. With the implementation of Act 181 and no consideration given to forest economy businesses, these complications are only going to get worse. These aren't new issues. Rural business owners have raised them long before Act 181 through testimony, stakeholder meetings, through good faith participation in official Act 250 reform discussions. And unfortunately, they were dismissed by a legislator as a non-issue. That disregard has real consequences. It's not just frustrating. It has undermined the businesses and the supply chains that Vermont depends on to manage its forests, to supply local wood products, support its farms, and sustain its rural communities. To be clear, the legislature has done important work for rural Vermont, and we're thankful for that. But when it comes to land use and environmental policy, many of us have been left out of the process, while others, often paid advocates, have had a disproportionate voice in shaping those outcomes. I've written to the Speaker of the House multiple times with specific examples of exclusion or indifference toward rural Vermonters in the House process, with an offer to discuss them, and I've received no response. None. So today, once again, rural Vermonters are being asked to trust the same process that has disregarded or actively works against them for years. The Senate is considering a delay for more stakeholder engagement, but we've already seen that movie. If we spend the next 3 or 4 years going through the same process with the same structure, the same voices driving it, we should expect the same results. We cannot do that. Too much is at stake. The problem here isn't a lack of input. The issue is a lack of balance and accountability of how that input is considered. If legislation affects landowners, they belong at the center of the process, not relegated to public comment sessions after the big picture policy decisions have been made. No more decisions about rural Vermont without rural Vermonters at the table. will say that again. There are no more decisions about rural Vermont without rural Vermonters. Thank you very much.
Let's hear it for Sam Lincoln. We now have Laura Lee Tester.
Good afternoon. I'm the director of the Northeast Kingdom Chamber of Commerce, and I'm speaking for the Northeast Kingdom at this moment. I want to remember that Vermont's motto is freedom and unity. And Act 181 threatens both. There is a divide in this state, and it's not political. Historians have called it the split between the uphillers and the downhillers, between those who believe that communities should govern themselves and those comfortable with making decisions for them from a distance. A tension is as old as Vermont itself. But what is happening right now is not balance, it's not equity, and it is not conservation. It's displacement. Let me be clear about what Act 181 does to rural Vermont. It limits what families can do with land that is often their only meaningful wealth. It's their retirement, their security, their legacy. When the state tells you where you can build and how you can subdivide, that is not just regulation, that is a taking. It reduces the value of the only asset that many families have, without apology and without recourse. The problem is it's also part of a pattern. I think at 181 is not all bad. I don't think that we should just repeal it. There are parts of it that actually have a lot of value. But we didn't listen to all of it. We did not bring everyone to the table to understand what it was really going to impact us all. But this pattern, it's a long, grinding pattern of policies that make the most basic things, farming, building, running a small business, recovering from a flood, nearly impossible. Kirby Mulch is an example. It's a business in Concord that did everything right. They spent years and tens of thousands of dollars just trying to get permission to sell mulch. That's not an outlier. It's not a warning. And no one in Montpelier has seemed to care. That has been talked about at length in many different testimonies. But here's what I know. 1,800 people left Vermont last year. Not because they didn't love it. They couldn't afford to stay.
Yeah.
And so what happens next? We look at our shrinking enrollments and close our rural schools. We look at rising costs and shrink our rural hospitals. It's called data-driven. It's called responsible. But it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And one that we didn't write. Someone else has done it for us. And I think we're at this moment where we feel like we are creating that divide, where rural Vermonters are called names, being dismissed and making us other, and that somehow makes it easier to enact some policies without letting us speak at the table. And that divide is being permitted, it's being cultivated, and we need to speak up. We are not against housing. We are not against environmental protection. We are against policies that place every burden on the people with the fewest resources and the least political power and then call it progress. You cannot call this a housing solution if it only works where there is already density and capital. And you cannot call it equity if rural Vermonters are the ones who are absorbing all of the loss. With 66% of Vermont's residents living in rural communities and 98% of our land mass is rural, I just need to ask, whose interests are we protecting here? And I am so appreciative of those legislators who are starting to listen and to think back about what their vote was and what it means. I am really grateful for that opportunity to open this conversation up. But just remember, Vermont was built on the promise of freedom and unity. This is and we refuse to be asked to accept less of both. Thank you so much.
Laura Lee Tester. Representative John O'Brien.
Thank you, Senator Ingalls. Thank you, rural Vermont, for coming today. It's so cold. I don't think the sap's running, and that's why you see Ian Ackerman and Greg Burt here. So we might as well be here and talk about Act 181. Neil Ryan, who invited me to come speak today, he said, how about 2 minutes? And I thought, well, that's a good idea. Maybe next session I would propose a bill that every elected public official cannot exceed 2 minutes with a speech. At least it would keep the promises to a minimum. Who I am, I represent Tunbridge and Royalton, pretty rural. I serve on House Ag, Food Resiliency and Forestry, the only committee I've ever been on. I live on the farm I grew up on. My wife and I run a wedding venue there now because it's the only way we can make a living farming. We hope our sons will build houses there and stay there. And whatever good or bad I do here, I'm always just going to be known as the guy who made the Fred Tuttle movie. Boy, have times changed. In 1970, when Act 250 was passed, it was passed by a Republican-dominated legislature and signed by Dean Davis, Governor Dean Davis, Republican. Now, Act 250, oh, guess what? It was 14 pages when it was passed. Now it's 250 pages, coincidentally. And Act 181 was 171 pages. But I look at the story of Act 181 as kind of how democracy should work. It's like the legislature, we pass a bill that has some good stuff in it and some rotten stuff in it. And then rural Vermont said, hey, there's a lot of rotten stuff in this. And then the legislature should listen to those voices and we should correct the rotten stuff. You'd hope common sense would prevail, but that's not a given. I'm on the select board in Tunbridge. We just made 2 trips to the Supreme Court and spent $75,000 to beat a lawsuit on a legal trail in Tunbridge. It was obvious with common sense that the select board in Tunbridge should be able to improve or maintain their legal trails, but not everybody felt that way. So let's make sure common sense prevails here. The irony is, like all of us behind me in the legislature, it's not always just, oh, let's just repeal 181. There's good stuff in 181 too. So I think that's what we have to work through here. So keep your voices loud and keep the pressure on us until we do the right thing. We need housing in Vermont. We need increased electrical capacity like solar, but we don't need to incentivize those things at the cost of farming. We need farms on prime ag soil. We don't need to build houses on all our farms or put up solar arrays on all our farms. We need working lands. We need working farms. We need working forests. We need small businesses in rural Vermont. Vermont needs to be more than Chittenden County and old growth forest. All right, that's 2 minutes. I went to Chelsea High School. Speaking of rural Vermont, I went to Chelsea High School, and we'd always play in sports all the other C schools. So we had Keenan, Craftsbury, Abbott, and the lovely town of Concord. The next speaker is from Concord, Ashley and Alex LaRoche.
How many of you missed work to come here today? Thank you. How many of you left the farm today to come here? Because I'm here to speak on behalf of those that couldn't leave the farm. I thought Vermont wanted families like mine We chose to return to Vermont to be closer to our aging grandparents and to raise our children surrounded by family. Act 181 seems to say that we're not welcome here. I'm writing on behalf of myself and my husband, retired Sergeant First Class Alexander LaRoche. He's a 100% service-connected disabled veteran with 5 tours. That's between Iraq and Afghanistan. That's 48 months total. This man has fought for our freedom. He now lives and thrives with multiple medical conditions, including a TBI and PTSD. Despite his injuries, he remains actively involved in our community and continues to coach soccer and baseball for our children and other local youth. We have a very active 3 children, and we're involved with their 4-H groups, and he continues to support all their activities related to their clubs. I'm a registered nurse working in an emergency department at a critical access hospital, and my goal is to begin nurse practitioner school in December, which will help alleviate the critical shortage of providers in this area. If there's anything that this community needs, they need more providers that are willing to work long shifts. When my husband retired after 20 years of service, we purchased the most affordable land we could find, 29 acres of rocks. This is located 4 miles from my grandparents' house, and this area is rural. It's got high rates of poverty, and we knew the schools would not meet all of our children's needs. But we believed in our community, and we believed that we could make it better. And now I've learned that our home has been mapped Tier 3. Because we are not wealthy, and we are not rich, and we work, this designation means our property is effectively barred from further development, preventing us from building, growing, or creating based on our dreams without heavy permits from people we've never met. It feels like we're frozen in place. It's not unreasonable that I want to live further away from a busy road to protect my daughter and her horse. It's not unreasonable for my husband, who fought for our country and bears internal scars, to want some privacy. I suppose we triggered the road rule too. And thank you to Joe, who plows our overly long driveway every winter. I understand that these laws are meant to protect wildlife, but it doesn't take a law and others controlling our actions to make this happen. We were already doing it. My 7-year-old son uses the property to track wildlife and participates in the fish and game programs, learning firsthand the value of conservation and stewardship. We have learned about rotational grazing through UVM extension and forest restoration, and we found a bunch of stone walls that had been forgotten, and so now we're restoring not only the land, but its history. Any trees that we cut down were to make room for rotational grazing so that someday we can sustain our family. While smaller trees were intentionally left for regeneration, we're careful to preserve shade trees and maintain ample space for the natural wildlife. Our land is not for Airbnbs. It's for my daughter Madeline to ride her quarter horse Harlow down the old logging trails. It's for my son Connor to build a treehouse with my husband. And it's for Alexis, who grew basil last year and made her own pesto. I take pride in supporting our local farms, buying from our local feed store, and teaching our children that you always help an animal when it's in need. My daughter picked blackberries there and makes jam. Our dogs run with the kids, and a potbelly pig named Remy meets you when you come to our driveway. Our children raise rabbits, collect eggs, and learn about the land beneath their feet. Last year, Madeline helped deliver a baby goat on our property, and I brought that goat into the nursing home, and it made people really happy. This land is not easy. It's cold, it's rugged, unforgiving, and the rocks. This is the land that my husband dreamed of while serving in the desert far from home, and it's the land that I prayed for, hoping that it would bring him the peace that he needed and keep our family together. I want my children to grow up like this. Not every child knows where their food comes from. They don't get to drink raw milk from the neighbor or gather eggs from their grandparents' chicken coop, but mine do, and that's because of the sacrifices my husband made. As Act 181 is currently written, it threatens something more tangible than just my property rights. It threatens my family and families like mine that are trying to build something meaningful and sustainable, rooted in our Vermont rural values. It threatens the ability for children and someday maybe my grandchildren to run barefoot across the land and learn from it and carry it forward. And I invite you all to visit. Walk the stone walls, see the back 10 that could one day maybe hold orchards, gardens, and the educational spaces that I dream of to share with the community. But bring boots because you're going to need them.
Thank you, Alex, for your service. We now have Neil and on Ryan.
Thanks, everyone. I can't top Ashley, so I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping. My wife and I farm in Corinth, Vermont. My family has started 3 farms in the last 50 years in Vermont. All 3 of them would have triggered the road rule. All 3 of them never would have been started under Act 181. You've heard a lot from people pursuing agricultural dreams today already. And one thing we've heard from proponents of Act 181 consistently is that agriculture and forestry are exempt. The activities are exempt. The farmer, her family, and her home are not exempt. It's time that we acknowledge that half-truth. There's an issue here that we think the activities are okay, but the home building is not. That Act 181 bars what the Farm Bureau has called the primary means of farm creation in Vermont these days, which is it starts with a home. It starts with families like Ashley's getting rolling. The second thing I want to talk about is a direct appeal to Vermont's media. I'm also a neighbor. The back roads and state highways in my town, in Orange, in Berkshire, in Washington, are now painted yellow on a map. That is a Tier 3 habitat corridor. All of those roads are people's homes. They are modest homes on small lots. They are trailers barely hanging in there. They are little old houses. They're people of limited means. What we have done is tell them that from this day forward, they're going to have a very difficult time improving their lives. Thus far, Act 181 for the last 2 years has been documented in abstract terms like smart growth, critical resources. We have not yet told the human stories. So my ask, I'm keeping this really short, is drive deeper into rural Vermont, drive the state highways, drive the dirt roads, stop into these places. They are map Tier 3. They are people's homes. They are people that deserve better. So please, Vermont's media, start telling the human stories. This is an economic justice issue.
Neil and on Ryan, folks. We next have Representative Laura Stabilia.
And I would ask members of the Rural Caucus to come stand with us if you would like to. Thank you all for taking the time to come here today, for taking the day off, for leaving the farm. I'm sorry that that was necessary, but it was necessary. And so it's important that you are here. My name is Representative Laura Stabilia. I live in Dover and I represent a bunch of rural towns. I am speaking today on behalf of the Rural Caucus leadership and our members. Our group is bipartisan. We are here to represent rural Vermonters and to bring your voices into the work of this building. Because we are not a monolith of thought, I will not be sharing tons of opinions. I will tell you what we've been doing. And I hope it gives you some hope that there are people that are listening and want to work with you. What we are seeing right now are Vermonters realizing how significant the changes in Act 181 are and asking why they were not part of the conversation earlier. It is understandable that people are angry. A lot of Vermonters are worried that they are going to lose control of their land, and that fear is real. And it is something we in the legislature must address directly. Act 181 was a large and complex bill, over 170 pages. It combined many housing, conservation, and historic land use changes that will shape Vermont for decades. And it reflected two urgent needs happening at once: a need to create more housing and a significant increase in how land use would be regulated in rural Vermont in order to protect species and habitats. When Act 181 was passed in 2024, members of the Rural Caucus were very active. We proposed and secured a number of amendments to address some of the more onerous aspects of the law. Over the past year, the Rural Caucus, which meets on Wednesday mornings at 8 a.m., and you are all welcome to join us, has repeatedly asked agencies, regional planning commissions, and municipal leaders how outreach was happening and what information we could share with our constituents. It has become clear that there was no single responsibility for making sure Vermonters understood all that Act 181 does. We believe when legislation affects your land, you should be notified directly. Coming into this session, members of the Rural Caucus believed it was important to slow things down so that our constituents could be fully informed before implementation. We proposed H 730 to delay parts of implementation, including the road rule. We proposed direct notice to landowners, and we proposed guidance to local officials so that they could understand how these changes might impact land values. In the House, members of the Committee of Jurisdiction were told by their chair that there would be no changes to Act 181 this year. In the Senate, the chair of that committee came and met with the Rural Caucus and asked us what we were hearing. While the Senate did not include our proposals on notice and valuation, in S 325, they did include and actually significantly extended the timelines we proposed. Right now, S 325 is the only proposal to delay the road rule and Tier 3 changes scheduled to take effect this summer. If it advances, there will be more work to do in the House, and your input will be important. Rural Caucus members understand that the landscape is changing, the weather is changing, and protecting species and habitat matters. We know that rural Vermonters live on and depend on that habitat too. The legislature will not get conservation right without you, the people who live on and care for this land every day. And so we thank you again for coming today. We have also been clear. If we are not careful, well-intentioned land use policies can and will contribute to rural gentrification and change who can afford to live in our small and rural communities. We do not believe that was the goal, and we absolutely do not believe it can be the outcome. As you've heard, rural Vermont is under real stress right now: schools, healthcare, and local economies. We are here and we need you engaged with us. Please continue to stay engaged, and we look forward to working with you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Senator Ann Watson, and I am delighted to join you today. I want to thank you all for showing up, for being here, because I think it really speaks to how deeply you care about Vermont's land and protecting Vermont's rural way of life. So thank you for being here. I'm a native Vermonter. I was born here. I was raised here. I've spent my whole life in Vermont. I, in fact, had ancestors that moved to Vermont in 1796, and that family farm stayed in our family for almost 200 years. And gosh, if I have anything to do with it, I'm going to try to buy it back someday. But I say all that to say that I have a high value on farming. We need to be protecting our family farms. And I believe that there's a time coming in America when our national food system is going to start to break down. And when that happens, we are going to depend even more on our local diversified family farms. And so I'm so grateful that you are here today. If we're going to protect our family farms, we need policies that do that. If I had any say, I would have everybody be a farmer. I would have a goat in every yard. I'd have a vegetable garden in every yard. And we need policies to protect that. And this is actually why Senator Ingalls and I have a great relationship, because we both value farming. And we may not see eye to eye on every topic, including Act 181 parts of it, but I am here today because I want to shout out the Rural Caucus. So if you're a member of the Rural Caucus, would you raise your hand? Thank you. Thank you for being here. So the needs of rural Vermont are just different than the needs of folks in, say, Burlington or Montpelier. But I know this, that every town in Vermont needs more housing. Every town needs housing for normal people, but not for the super wealthy. We need housing for teachers, for carpenters, for firefighters, doctors and nurses, and for farmers and for farm workers. We need you to build those houses for your children. And it is my hope that we'll be able to grow the housing stock in every town in Vermont. I went to the Rural Caucus. I went to the Rural Caucus when S325 was being developed. I heard their asks, and we incorporated many of those asks into S325. And I'm grateful for that collaboration, and I would do it again. And together, I think we can figure this out. We need time, we need feedback, we need to hear from you. And I want to leave you with an open invitation. I want to give you an open invitation. I want to know your concerns. I want to hear from you. I want to take into account your concerns as we continue to make changes to Act 250. We know that's inevitable, and I want to work together with you to figure this out. Thank you so much.
That concludes our day. I just want to remind you folks, you're here in numbers. If there's one thing that scares politicians, it's big numbers. Go home, get the other 80% of the people who couldn't be here today. As I said, I got 1,000 names right here in my pocket of people who wanted to come and couldn't make it. Get involved, get engaged, let your voices heard. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, of all of you who made the day to come here and to let your voices be heard. We can't do this without you. Thank you.
I think they were yelling at me. Thank you, everybody, for watching.
I couldn't remember. Why did we have to end it?